Okay guys, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to think about it seriously before you answer. If I asked you right now, which country do you think is going to emerge as the single biggest winner when this war is finally over? What would you say? America? No. America is spending hundreds of billions of dollars, taking casualties, and watching its alliances fracture one by one. That is not winning. China? Possible. But China has its own problems. A collapsing property market, a slowing economy, and a leadership that is watching very carefully to see how this war ends before committing to anything. Iran? Iran is surviving. That is not the same as winning. The country I believe is going to emerge as the biggest surprise winner of this entire geopolitical crisis is Japan. And I know exactly what you are thinking right now. Japan, the country with the oldest population in the world, 30 years of economic stagnation, zero natural resources, dependent on China for trade and the Middle East for energy. That Japan? Yes, that Japan. And by the end of this video, you will understand why every analyst who is counting Japan out right now is making one of the most expensive mistakes in geopolitical forecasting, because they are reading the data, but they are not reading the history. And in Japan's case, the history tells a completely different story. Let us go. Part 1. Let me be completely honest with you about Japan's problems, because I am not going to stand here and tell you Japan has no weaknesses. It has serious ones, and you need to understand them before you can understand why they do not mean what most analysts think they mean. Problem number 1, demographics. Japan has the oldest population on Earth. Not one of the oldest. The oldest. More than 28% of the population is over 65 years old. And that number keeps rising. Fewer workers, less innovation, a growing burden of elderly care. Every standard economic model says this is a terminal condition for growth. Problem number 2, debt and stagnation. Japan has been stuck in what economists call a deflationary spiral for 30 years. While China was growing at 8, 9, 10% a year, Japan was growing at 1. Its national debt is over 250% of GDP. By any conventional metric, this is a deeply troubled economy. Problem number 3, resource dependence. Japan is a small island nation with almost no domestic oil, no significant natural gas, and not enough agricultural land to feed its own population. It imports practically everything. And that dependence creates what looks like the most dangerous vulnerability of all. Japan's existential vulnerability on paper. 93% of crude oil imports flow through the Strait of Hormuz. Critical shipping lanes pass close to Taiwan. China could strangle Japan without firing a shot. Zero domestic energy reserves beyond 90 days of strategic petroleum supply. Largest trading partner is China, the same country that could blockade its energy. On paper, a nation one crisis away from economic collapse. So when you read the financial press on Japan, when you see the headlines about demographic decline and debt mountains and energy vulnerability, they are not making up numbers. The data is real. But here's the thing. The data is only telling you where Japan is standing right now. It is not telling you what Japan does when it is standing there. And that is exactly where every analyst who is bearish on Japan makes their fatal mistake. Because to understand what Japan does when its back is against the wall, you do not look at a spreadsheet. You look at history. Part 2. I want to take you through 3 moments in Japanese history. 3 moments that I think are the most important things you can possibly understand about this country. Because every time the world counted Japan out, every single time, Japan did something no one expected. Moment 1. The year is 1274. The Mongol Empire, the most powerful military force the world had ever seen, is preparing to invade Japan. At this point, the Mongols have already conquered China, conquered Persia, conquered Russia. Not one nation on earth had successfully resisted a full Mongol invasion. Not one. And Japan, at this moment, was a small, divided, feudal nation with no unified army, no central command, and no experience fighting anything remotely close to a Mongol military force. On paper, this was not a war. It was an execution. But the Japanese fought back with a ferocity and a unity that nobody anticipated. And then something happened that the Japanese called the kamikaze, the divine wind. A massive typhoon destroyed the Mongol fleet. The invasion failed. The Mongols came back in 1281, a larger force, the largest naval invasion fleet the world had ever assembled. And again, the Japanese fought. And again, a typhoon destroyed the fleet. Japan defeated the greatest empire in the world, twice, as a feudal divided nation with no unified army. The pattern, 3 times. Japan defied the impossible, 1274 and 1281, defeated the Mongol Empire twice as a feudal nation with no unified military. 1868, 1905, transformed from feudal isolation to industrial power in one generation. Defeated Russia, 1945, 1970. Rebuilt from total atomic devastation to become the world's #2 economy in 25 years. The signal: Japan does not just survive existential crises. It uses them as catalysts for transformation. Moment 2. The year is around 1850. Britain, France, and America are carving up Asia. They colonized India. They humiliated China in the Opium Wars. They were coming for Japan next. And Japan at this moment was still a feudal society with samurai swords, cut off from the world with no industrial capacity whatsoever. Every strategic analyst of that era would have said Japan's colonization was inevitable. There was no model, none, in which a backward feudal society could resist the full industrial and military force of 19th century Western empires. What Japan did instead remains one of the most extraordinary decisions in the history of any nation. It looked at what happened to China. It studied the pattern, and then it made a total, absolute, uncompromising decision. Japan would master everything that made the West powerful. Industrial systems, scientific knowledge, military organization, technological innovation, all of it, completely. In a single generation, roughly 25 years, Japan went from samurai swords to defeating Russia in open military conflict. In 1905, Japan became the first Asian nation in modern history to defeat a European empire on the battlefield. In 25 years, from feudalism to global military power. Moment 3, August 1945. Japan had just been hit by 2 atomic bombs. Its navy was destroyed. Its cities were burned to the ground. Its economy was rubble. By any conventional standard, by any precedent in human history, Japan was finished. Not weakened, not struggling, finished. 25 years later, Japan was the second largest economy on Earth. 25 years. From atomic devastation to the world's second largest economy, without natural resources, without a military, on a small island nation. That is not recovery, that is transformation. And it is the same transformation every single time. When Japan faces an existential crisis, it does not collapse. It restructures. It studies what it needs to survive. And then it executes with a speed and discipline that almost no other nation can match. Now, here is the question. What does that pattern tell us about Japan today, right now, as the world is entering its most dangerous geopolitical period in 80 years? Part 3. The activation moment. And this is the part I want you to really pay attention to, because this is where the historical pattern meets the present situation, and where the picture becomes very clear. The world right now is undergoing 3 massive structural shifts. And on the surface, again, on the surface, all 3 of them look like threats to Japan. But when you apply the historical lens, you see that all 3 of them are actually the exact conditions under which Japan has historically thrived. Shift number 1, remilitarization. Japan has operated under a pacifist constitution since 1945. Article 9, no offensive military capacity, rely on America for security. For 80 years, that worked fine, but now America is overstretched in the Middle East. Its forces are being pulled from Japan to fight in Iran, and China is running military exercises around Taiwan at the same moment. Japan's military transformation. What is already happening? Japan doubled its defense budget, largest military expansion since World War II, developing hypersonic weapons, long-range strike capability, advanced submarine fleet, signed security agreements with Australia, Philippines, UK, and South Korea, acquired Tomahawk cruise missiles, first offensive strike capability since 1945. Legal scholars actively debating constitutional reinterpretation to enable collective defense timeline from pacifist constitution to offensive strike capability in under 5 years. Japan is not debating whether to remilitarize. It has already started, and it is doing it at exactly the speed and decisiveness that every historical transformation Japan has ever undergone has shown. When Japan decides to change, it does not do it slowly. Shift number 2. Economic fragmentation. As globalization breaks down, as supply chains get reshored, as countries stop trusting each other's products, most economies are struggling to adapt. But here is something that does not get enough attention. Japan has been preparing for exactly this kind of world for decades. Japan's industrial system is the most energy efficient on the planet. Its manufacturing is optimized for precision, minimal waste, maximum output from minimal input, because it had to be. A country with no resources cannot afford to be wasteful. That forced discipline for decades is now a competitive advantage in a world where energy is expensive and supply chains are unreliable. And Japan has spent 30 years investing in robotics, advanced materials, semiconductor manufacturing equipment, and precision engineering that the world now desperately needs. Not chips themselves, the machines that make chips. ASML in the Netherlands and Tokyo Electron and Shin-Etsu in Japan effectively control the entire global semiconductor manufacturing supply chain. That is not a vulnerable position. That is a chokehold. Japan's economic chokehold, what most people miss Tokyo Electron, makes sure 30% of the world's semiconductor manufacturing equipment. Shin-Etsu Chemical produces 30% of global silicon wafer supply. Essential for every chip on Earth, Murata Manufacturing makes 40% of the world's ceramic capacitors in every smartphone ever made. JSR Corporation controls critical photoresist chemicals. Without them, no semiconductor fab runs. Bottom line, you cannot build chips anywhere in any country without Japan's materials and machines. Shift number 3, the China question. Everyone frames China's rise as a threat to Japan. And yes, a rising China with aggressive territorial ambitions is a genuine security concern for Tokyo. But look at what China's rise has also done. It has made every country in Asia and every major Western economy look for an alternative to Chinese manufacturing. And Japan, with its quality, its precision, its intellectual property protections, its political stability, is the most obvious answer. As companies leave China, they are not going to Vietnam or Indonesia. Not for advanced manufacturing. They are going to Japan. Japanese defense contracts, technology partnerships, nearshoring deals are accelerating at a rate that is not reflected in any of the bearish headlines. Part 4. So let me make this concrete. What does Japan actually winning look like? What is the scenario? Here's how I see it playing out. Step by step. Step 1. This war ends. Eventually. All wars do. And when it ends, there is going to be a massive rebuilding of every broken alliance and every broken supply chain. And Japan, which has sat quietly on the sidelines, refused to be drawn into anyone's coalition, maintained relationships with every major power, is going to be the most trusted neutral party in the entire Indo-Pacific. Step 2. America comes out of this war weaker, not defeated, not irrelevant, but overstretched, indebted, and politically divided. And in that environment, every country in Asia that currently relies entirely on American military protection starts asking the same question. What if America is not always going to be there? What do we do? And the answer that Japan is building towards is we build our own capability and we build it fast. Step 3. China has a problem that Japan does not have. China built its entire economic model on export-led growth. But if the Western countries it exports to are decoupling, that model breaks. Japan, by contrast, owns the equipment and materials that China and the entire world needs to keep making semiconductors. You cannot decouple from Japan because Japan is embedded in every supply chain that matters. The scenario where Japan wins, war ends, America weakened but present, Asia scrambles for security alternatives. Japan, already remilitarized, becomes the credible regional security anchor, supply chain decoupling accelerates. Japan's manufacturing precision becomes premium product, semiconductor equipment monopoly locked in. No fab anywhere runs without Japanese materials. Yen depreciates further. Japanese exports become irresistibly cheap for global buyers. Net result, Japan goes from overlooked and aging to indispensable and strategic in 1 decade. And here's the final piece, the yen. Right now, the yen is extremely weak, which looks like a problem. It makes imports more expensive, which hurts a resource-dependent country. But a weak yen also makes Japanese exports extraordinarily cheap for the rest of the world. And when you combine cheap Japanese products with the world's best precision manufacturing and control of critical semiconductor materials, that is a combination that competitors cannot easily replicate. Japan is not winning right now. Let me be absolutely clear about that. Right now, Japan is paying $80 billion a year in extra energy costs. Its economy is under pressure. Its people are anxious about the future. But Japan has been in worse positions than this, much worse. And every single time, it has emerged stronger than before. Not because of luck, not because of natural resources, because of something much harder to quantify and much harder to replicate. A collective national discipline and a capacity for transformation that no other country in the world has demonstrated at this scale. So let us bring this together. Every analyst looking at Japan right now sees the same data. Oldest population in the world, 30 years of economic stagnation, no natural resources, energy dependence, debt burden, and they reach the same conclusion. Japan is declining. Japan is being left behind. But history says something different. History says that Japan, when faced with what looks like an impossible situation, the Mongol invasions, Western colonization, atomic devastation, does not decline. It transforms faster and more completely than anyone expects. And every single time it emerges from that transformation stronger and more strategically positioned than it was before. Right now, Japan is remilitarizing at a pace not seen since World War II. It controls the materials and equipment that every semiconductor factory on Earth depends on. It is the most trusted neutral party in a region full of distrust. And it is doing all of this quietly, deliberately, without drawing attention to itself. The people counting Japan out are reading a spreadsheet. They are not reading the history. And if you only read the spreadsheet, you are going to be very surprised by what Japan looks like in 10 years. Tell me in the comments, do you think Japan is declining or transforming? I genuinely want to know which side you are on, because this is one of the most interesting geopolitical debates of the next decade. Subscribe for more analysis like this, explained in plain English without the spin. And in the next video, I want to show you the one country that is in an even more surprising position than Japan, a country that everyone thinks is a victim of this war, but is quietly positioning itself to be the most important energy power of the next 30 years. I will see you there.